March the 24th, 2026 at 8 a.m., but it really isn't 8 a.m. It's 6 p.m. at the W.C. O'Neill Arena Complex in the dining room. So we have record of attendance and we have all present except for Mark Blanchard. Is he online? No, so Mark Blanchard is not here. Okay. We recognize that we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Beskotomagati people under the Linguistic Way people, Mi'kmaq and people as well. So we welcome you. Approval of the agenda. We're here just for the hearing of objections, so I guess I need a mover and a seconder. Mr. Heenan, moves. Seconder. Okay, Deputy Mayor Neal. Any additions? No, can't be. So, that being so, all those in favor of accepting the agenda as say aye. Aye. Contrary minded? Carried. Disclosure of a conflict of interest by anyone? This is hard to read. None. And so we don't have any presentations and we are at the hearing of objections. So what we ask in the hearing of objections is that we have gone through the first reading of the municipal plan. So it is in its first reading. This is for the zoning bylaw in draft form only, and these are the hearing of objections. We ask that if you are going to speak, is there a mic set up, Flo? Way over there. So you have to go to the microphone, identify yourself, and then you will be given 5 to 10 minutes. We don't want to be here all night. So we'll give you a 1 minute or 2 minute warning, and then that'll be it for this evening. And then we are going downstairs, right, for the second meeting. So with that being said, we will begin. There's no presentation, so if you have anything with which to say, please come to the microphone, identify yourself, and speak. Thank you.
I'm just going to set a timer just so I know. So my name is Shannon Fellows. I live in the rural area where you're proposing these changes. And I have some concerns about the environmental impact that are going to happen in especially the zone 3, I believe. Is the thing about my main concern is with the farming stuff is, are you aware of the water pollution that might potentially occur if you allow these things to go through? Because under your regulations, you talk about livestock farming and you talk about also marijuana farming specifically. Now, regardless of anybody's political beliefs about the use of marijuana, it has been there was an Australian study that found that areas around these types of grow-ops are a high risk for autoimmune disorders and for asthma and other related things with regards to pollen. Massive increases in cases regarding that like occurring. And also water runoff is found to have higher levels of nitrogen and phosphorus in the soil, as well as bioorganic, contamination. Those contaminations can form in under 2 years after these kinds of like farming stuff is put in, and it can take over a decade to fix. By the time you would have to reassess things to make it so it wouldn't be an issue, it would already be too late. And if this contamination occurs, does the city plan on running out to the rural areas of Shamcook and Bayside, where I'm at, by the way? Are they going to be running waterways and stuff if our water gets contaminated? And also, the other concern is, you mentioned forestry is one of your potential things you're allowing. If you cut down all the trees, what are we going to do about the flooding that could potentially occur? Because there's a lot of hills in those areas. You're going to have sliding and stuff potentially occurring, as well as the contamination and stuff. But also with marijuana grow-ops and general crop grow-ops, there is an increase in fire hazards, especially with marijuana grow-ops, because they require a very dry environment when it comes to harvesting. Under your regulations, these are allowed without asking council. So someone like me who actually had to move out of their previous city because somebody opened one of these grow-ops nearby, I'm allergic, like lethally. They can be put in, couldn't do anything about it. Are you going to put any sort of regulations in with regards to that? Because I do not believe that should go unregulated. And also, it's going to open up a lot of theft potentially, because I know when that grow up went in near my old farmer place, that place was getting broken into every other week because people would go, oh, I can get free weed here. I'm going to go break in and steal crap. And it became an issue to the point where even my place was getting scanned over by thieves. And where I know you're going to be putting in more affordable housing and stuff like that, there is a higher chance of crime starting to develop. It is a major concern. I have. Oh, there's also the smell warning thing. I don't want us to really end up like Sussex because I've done the flea market there for like a decade, and the way in you can smell the manure really strong for miles out. Uh, if everybody turns their property into farming stuff in that area, you're gonna have a major bad smell. You know what I'm talking about. Um, that's going to affect tourism. People are not going to want to visit a place twice that smells like cow fecal matter. What are you planning to do to kind of regulate that? Because there's no regulations with regards to pesticides and stuff like that, which might, with where we live in a winding area, this might actually affect King Spray and their stuff with their regards to their lady beetles that aren't actually ladybugs. For the record, they bite. And stuff like that. Like, what are you going to do about the smell-related contamination in the air, the potential autoimmune stuff that could develop due to farming biohazards, and just the general risk of wildfire and water contamination? Is there any plans? Because this document, I see a lot of flaws in it when I've gone through it. Like, I have a university degree, a minor in business. My specification was very close to being marketing and management. I went through this document. It is not specific enough with your regulations, I find, and you really need to crack down on the details about the nitty-gritty. I do not think you should be rushing this when you have till 2028 to do this. I think you need to take the time, full time, get everything properly assessed, surveyed, and actually have somebody from environmental come in and actually go over this, because I see a lot of hazards that could be potentially occurring that will not be a quick fix. And I am worried about the sound safety in the rural areas, especially where you don't specify what really applies to just rural and in the city, because some of your regulations don't even work. Anyways, that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much.
My name is Guy Grew. I live at 50 Ernest Street in town. First off, thank you for the opportunity to speak about the proposed zoning bylaw. The proposed municipal plan and zoning bylaws are complicated documents that do not reflect community values. These documents were done with little public consultation. They advocate densification of the National Historic Site, the town plat, allow a multitude of new institutional uses, create new rules for rural residents, disregard the rights of existing property owners, and threaten the very fabric of St. Andrews. These are important bylaws that have a big impact on property values, how people can use their property, what developments can occur on adjacent properties, the quiet enjoyment of their homes, and the general look and feel of our town. The town does not appear to have done the engineering studies to determine if the water and sewer system, pipe sizes, electrical grid, internet capacity, road widths are capable of handling the increased densification proposed in this bylaw. The zoning bylaw also removes the requirement for parking without figuring out where the cars will park, especially during the busy tourist season and in the winter. The public has a right to have full public input and a right to be heard, which has not happened. The deadline for completion of these plans is the 1st of January 2028, and there is lots of time to develop proper plans with full public input and proper engineering studies, so why the rush? The municipal plan and zoning bylaw represent a clear and present danger to the built heritage of St. Andrews. The municipal plan proposes to densify the town plat by developing off-street public parking facilities and promoting infill housing developments in a national historic district. The proposed zoning bylaw takes this densification one step further by permitting 4 and 8-unit apartments throughout the National Historic District, while permitting short-term rentals and institutional uses on every property and small-scale commercial operations on select properties. This will forever alter the character of the town and destroy an important national historic site. There's also a negative impact on existing property owners. In town, the zoning bylaw permits 4 and 8-unit apartments as close as 5 feet from the property line, with short-term rentals, home-based businesses, and institutional uses such as a community hall with a liquor license, a residential care facility for mental patients, educational institution with dormitories allowed on every property. Some properties zoned as U2, the bylaw expands on the size of the institutional uses and allows small-scale commercial uses such as bakeries, retail stores, cafes, salons, convenience stores. These additional uses permitted in the zoning bylaw can have a significant impact on property values, parking, noise, and disruptions. Imagine for a second being sandwiched between 2 8-unit apartment buildings with balconies overlooking your yard on both sides, or having a licensed commercial or community hall and a convenience store as neighbors. Under this proposed bylaw, these situations are permitted, and there's nothing an existing property owner could do. In rural areas, the situation is the opposite. Property owners have had few restrictions and regulations on the use of their properties. This zoning bylaw and municipal plan impose a whole new set of rules and regulations that were not asked for and are not wanted. The level of public consultation throughout this process has been minimal, and the 2 bylaws do not reflect community values. Whenever there have been briefings or Q&A sessions, it does not appear as though anyone is listening, and changes to the municipal plan and zoning bylaw have been minimal. On February 11th, about 75 people braved a winter storm to voice their concerns at the notice of objections to the municipal plan. Yet on the 2nd of March, Council approved the municipal plan at first reading, with only Councillor Weir voting against. Now we are hearing similar concerns at the notice of objections for the zoning bylaw, but again, there is no evidence that anyone is listening, and restricting speakers to 5 minutes demonstrates an unwillingness to engage in true public consultation and participation. Sadly, it appears that unless there is a change in council in the upcoming municipal election, I fear that on the 12th of May, this will be your new municipal plan and zoning bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, I'm Lori Fellows. I live in Bayside.
This zoning bylaw does not show an understanding of rural life, and it strips away the rights of landowners in the rural zones that they had before amalgamation. People that live in the country like to do multiple things on their property, and we don't want to be limited to such stringent rules. The changes are clearly designed to strip economic activity from rural areas in favor of pushing them into St. Andrews. Zoning laws decrease the land value by removing the ability to conduct revenue-generating activities, create jobs, provide tourist attractions, accommodations, and general residential living, all in favor of focusing on cheaper land value activities like farming and forestry. It also creates conservation zones that provide benefit to the town of St. Andrews via protection of the water supply by stripping away usefulness of the land to the landowners. St. Andrews gets a benefit while the landowners are saddled with property that they can no longer use. The zoning changes directly impact plans we had for our property in particular, and we are not the only ones that will be negatively impacted by this. As far as commercial activity goes, there are 4 commercial uses that are detailed in the plan, and all 4 are problematic. The plan limits building sizes, number of employees, and thus limits job creation. It affects parking and the ability to advertise with signs. This prevents buildings or businesses from being economically viable in some cases. For example, a home-based business is limited to 10% of the size of the home and allows for only 1 employee at a time that does not live within the home. This clearly shows that there is little understanding of how these type of businesses operate. If you have a small home, for example, 10% may not be even large enough for a small showroom. And generally in a home business like this, you will have a showroom, working space, and storage all within your home. So you need more space. And I've for one have had home businesses before, and usually for me, it takes up a space for retail and then almost half of my basement. And my personal property in Bayside has no basement, so it will be all on a main floor and in a garage. And 100%, will be larger than 10%. So if this stays on here, I just can't do it. Also note that making your own products take up a lot more space than selling someone else's products because you need space to do the work to make the products and to store all your materials. So again, that 10% is too small. As for the 1 employee limitation for some from outside of your home, if you have a business like this where you hire someone to help make the products and someone to sell the products, you may need more than just what you have for your family themselves to do this. And it also makes it so you can't leave your employees to work in your business and go run errands or take a vacation. You have to shut things down and you lose money doing that. The requirement for equipment to all be kept indoors is also problematic if you live out in a rural area because you might want to put sale tables out front so the cars going by can see that there's something there they should stop for. And you might want a larger sign than having a small sign to hide that there's a business, because in town you can walk by, you can see that little sign, but out in the rural where your house is further back from the road and the cars are going by at least 100 kilometers an hour by our house, they're just not going to see anything to stop. And sign limitations, for the lighted signs, I think we need to be able to put a small lit up open sign out by the street at night out in Bayside, because the cars going down are not going to see a little sign that's lit up in your window or on the side of your building when it's way back from the road. They just blinders on, they won't see it at all. And especially at night, there'll be no way that they can tell that you're open. And rural areas also should be allowed to put up the large open sign flags that you see at other businesses out, not right on the road, but close to the road, so they can see there's something there when they go by. Small scale businesses are also problematic because, again, there's a limitation of 3 employees for a small base business. And it was mentioning things like bakeries, small retail store, office, salon, cafe, just for examples. And most of these will have more than just 3 employees. I've run an office, I've run a small retail store, and again, like, you usually need more people than that. And then looking at the business sizes for small scale, medium scale, and large scale commercial. Depending on the zone, the small scale is limited to 200 square meters or 500 square meters, and the medium scale and large scale is limited to 500 square meters. While limiting the size in an urban area might make sense because there are smaller lots, in a rural region, it makes no sense to limit the size in this way when we have so much more land space to use. This decreases the amount of economic activity that can occur in the rural area. Now, I made a chart. I just went through maps and measured different businesses in St. Andrews and St. Stephen just to see the size of them. And the home hardware in St. Andrews, for instance, is 200 square meters. So that would fit close to that 200 square meter size. But almost every other business that I measured was much larger than that. The antique store next door here is 443 square meters. Great Canadian Dollar Store is 629. The grocery store is over 1,000 square meters. Irving and St. Stephen is 1,100 square meters. My own property and the area between my apple trees alone is 1,200 square meters. I looked at the concert area in St. John for Area 506. And that is about 1,600 square meters. And on and on. Kira Amphitheater, 2,400 square meters. Mayfield Gardens, 4,200 square meters. So it clearly shows that things that are permitted in the medium scale or large scale just do not fit those size requirements. For Kira Amphitheater, it's, almost 5 times that limit, yet a medium scale is supposed to allow an amphitheater. There's just no way you could sell enough tickets to pay for a site like that with that small footprint. The garden center too, 3,000 square meters versus 500.
Excuse me, you have to start wrapping up, please.
Okay. Also just want to comment about the camps and the campgrounds on R3. It is listed as an allowable secondary use, but you are not allowed to do short-term rentals on that same property. So you can put in some camps, but you can't rent them out. And that also decreases the ability to make any money off of this. So thank you.
Thank you. And we do have your detailed letters.
I'm Scott Fellows. I live in Bayside. If you look at the quick reference table, all the red prohibited restrictions on C1, C2 zones with an R3 zone that only allows legacy industries like farming, you're clearly signaling the intent to sterilize these zones and property for any future residential or modern commercial use. It is an attempt to force more of this private land into rural resource categories that benefit for the region's green appearance, food, and watershed while stripping us of our rights to live and work our land as a modern citizen. This is not regulation. This is clearly providing a public advantage and giving you beneficial interest. According to the Supreme Court, this is the definition of constructive taking or de facto expropriation. In Annapolis 2022 and Lynch 2024 SEC rulings, they confirmed that watershed protection and forced farming forestry does not give the government a free pass to ignore property rights. This town is likely liable to pay fair market value at highest and best use for the land it is trying to legislatively appropriate. This is not a zoning plan, it's a clear confiscation of our property rights. Looking at Schedule A map, these pretend lines you have clearly artificially created, there is no physical difference in justification for the R2, R3 boundary. It's a rights cliff. Removing rights and fragmenting a large lot into multiple zones can make it harder to sell or develop as a cohesive unit, seriously impacting our property value. Forcing 75% of property footprint into a specific economic sector like agriculture, forestry, that may not be viable on a specific lot is a functional confiscation of land's utility. A house on 25% of the land does not compensate for the town's forced control of the other 75% for its own rural resource optics. This clear devaluation could trigger a mass lawsuit for injurious affection. Under the Assessments Act, your property is valued based on its highest and best use. With this zoning, you make it clear 75% of our land's highest use is low-value forestry. We will be asking for a reassessment from Service New Brunswick because this bylaw effectively removes most of all the value, and it's clear about it. When we succeed in dropping our property taxes, won't that hurt the town's budget? Because you do get your budget based on 30% of rural taxes collected. All those new zones in the map define what you can and cannot do. My rights as a landowner. Those lines are legal boundaries. I thought under the New Brunswick Land Survey Act, the only people that can create legally binding line is a certified land surveyor. Who pays for that? You can't place that burden on us. GIS is fine for map, but Community Planning Act requires zoning to be certain and identifiable. GIS lines with a survey to restrict property rights is a breach of administrative fairness and could fail the test of certainty. Any judge could toss out this bylaw as void for vagueness. Pack discretion, unpredictable conditions, conditional uses. Rules must be clear before you apply. Study demands. Officer can demand costly studies at will. Burden must match the risk. Mandatory 75% agriculture footprint. Reasonable lists. Zoning should limit harm, not dictate business. Overlay maps. Restrictions based on generalized maps. Accuracy. Administrative decisions must be based on fact. These points argue the bylaw is not just changing in zoning, but a change in the legal relationship between the town and the landowner, where the town gains broad discretionary power while the landowner loses certainty and property value. I'm in IT. Forestry farming is not my profession. Are you going to pay for me to transition? It is obvious you're planning on turning Bayside and Shamcook into a driveway for the town. You cannot say this is what the MB Statement of Public Interest wanted you to do. ELG may approve the process, but the municipality carries the liability. I think you're opening the town's taxpayers to a large mass action lawsuit. I'm also so concerned with this, I'm going to take this before the Local Governments Commission to review. I'm also going to consult with a lawyer to look at the options for group legal action if you choose to pass this. Lastly, I plan to put up a legally sized protest sign on my property on the 127 as it is protected by SCC Grenard 2002 and my Charter of Rights, alerting the community to what S25 is trying to do. And I think everyone else should know. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
First, I want to say I'm grateful to the councillors for all the time they give to running this town. I realise, what a big job it is.
Jillian,
I'm Gillian Peterson-Mjornis. I live in St Andrews. And my concern with the proposed zoning plans relate to the town plat. The plans as proposed seem to be of a cookie cutter variety. Almost exactly the same as the one I've seen for St George. It doesn't seem to address the unique character and heritage of St Andrews. There's been a lot of talk about densification, and that would destroy the charm that draws visitors and residents to the town. Additional apartments mushrooming up in backyards won't provide affordable housing. Most would be Airbnbs, expensive short-term accommodation. And then there's the town's resources. They're already stretched. There's insufficient parking, one relatively small grocery store, no permanent police presence, and we rely on a volunteer fire department for which residents are very grateful. And what about water and sewage? Already this year, New Brunswickers are being asked to conserve water because of the lack of winter snow and water. And I'm also worried about the home-based businesses. You can see in other towns some of the businesses that have sprung up in residential areas that are not very attractive and which most people would not want to find next door to them. And finally, I feel it would be really good if we could have an evening when people ask you questions. I'm sure many of you sit here and you think, oh, you know, yeah, that doesn't make a good point. But we need your answers to know what your input will be. Thank you.
thank you very much. I thought we were doing that later.
Good evening. My name is Michel Tremblay, and I live in Bayside on River Road. I agree with a lot of people that have mentioned that there was a lack of communication and consultation. I think if there would have been more consultation, I wouldn't be here tonight speaking. I'm only here to formally request that the area known as historical landings, which is River Road, be rezoned as just a single family dwelling, residential only, nothing else, no mini homes, no commercial, nothing else. The simple reason is that this is how the three houses that are currently there, this is how it was sold to us. And I believe that some of you do know that because of previous interaction with the committee. Now, I am formally requesting that tonight, and I hope that further iteration of this document will show a further restriction of that area. Well, thank you very much. And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry, I have to switch glasses to be able to read. Thanks. Hi, I'm Brenda Hooper Rowland. I'm a resident of Bayside. I'm also a descendant of the original land grant family of 1784. I feel a deep responsibility to help preserve and carry forward the foundational values that define St. Andrews, its history, sense of community, and enduring connection to this place. The thoughtful stewardship of these principles is essential to ensuring the future generations inherit not only a few landmarks, but the spirit that sustained this town since the very beginning. I submitted a detailed written objection, but I would like to take this opportunity to offer a summarized version in person and on the record. I would like to first begin to recognize the work that has gone into this bylaw thus far, as well as the goal of modernizing the zoning of our community. However, my concern is that its current form, Z25, may create unnecessary barriers for the very residents it's meant to serve. The key issue in the heavy reliance on subjective language, terms like appropriate, compatible, decisions left at the discretion of council or committees. While some flexibility may be necessary, too much discretion without clear criteria leads to uncertainty, inconsistent decisions, and a lack of transparency for property owners. Put simply, residents should be able to read this document and understand the parameters they are being required to live within. Should they have a unique request, then that should be put to council or to the committee. Residents should not have to guess whether something will or will not be approved. This becomes a real issue when we look at how the bylaw may affect everyday activities in a place like St. Andrews. For example, it's not uncommon for a resident to want to run a small business from their homes. This is low impact, small scale activity that supports local economy. But under a more discretionary system, instead of setting parameters in which they can function, it would require them to obtain approvals, incur expenses, all which in the end could be refused. This process creates hurdles, which in turn discourages creativity and entrepreneurial spirit. Similarly, the rural property owners may want to add a small secondary dwelling like a granny suite for family or seasonal workers or students, or they may wish to simply have a small business to supplement their household income. This type of ingenuity should be nurtured to help them solve gaps instead of creating hurdles. St. Andrews is a historical town plat and not just a historical business district. We must remain sensitive to that. The original layout wasn't designed for modern demands of parking or a vision of densification. With limited space and existing constraints, it's important that the bylaw carefully considers how increased density or new uses will impact the uniqueness of the town and its overall functionality. Funding the appropriate balance is not an easy task, and there is more work to be done on Z25 to achieve balance. I am concerned that expanding the number of situations requiring discretionary approval will increase the workload on staff, council, and could require additional hires while slowing down what should be routine decisions. When low impact everyday uses become discretionary rather permitted, the result is not better planning. It's more fraction, more delays, added costs, and less confidence in our system. Finally, with greater clarity, it is needed around the term non-conforming uses. property owners should clearly understand their ability to maintain, repair, and modestly expand the existing. This is not covered in Z25. There is still work to be done. I would respectfully urge council to strengthen Z25 by replacing subjective language with measurable standards, reducing reliance on discretionary approval for low-impact uses, maintain property flexibility in rural areas, greater clarity on non-conforming uses, and ensuring the bylaw is practical, understandable for residents to reference. At its core, governing documents like Z25 should have balance. A modern zoning bylaw should provide clarity, predictability, and fairness. Currently, it's creating uncertainty and confusion. I know I've said this before on MP 25, but I'm not opposed to modernization. But these documents need to work in practice, not just what's on paper. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on draft zoning bylaw 25, and thank you all for your time and consideration. And just in closing, I want to thank the council for the great work they did on getting us more doctors for the Wellness Center. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Braff. I am a business owner of the area, have been for over 20 years now. And I also live in Shamcook. I live on 60 acres and I do not know where my house should be. I am an R1, I am a C1, a C2, and an R3. That is my property. In the area that we're supposed to be protecting by the watershed, I can have a small base business. In my big area where my house is, I am not allowed a home-based business, which is 60 acres. I'd like to know who in tarnation that is affecting. It doesn't make sense. Myself, I am not an engineer and I do not try to be an engineer. So for everybody that is in those areas, thank you. But for us people that want to just have a beautiful home, a property for my children, my 6 grandchildren, that it is a place for them, this does not make sense. I'm asking you, please consider us people. Consider this is not fair, that some things I understand, but it's got to be redone. It's got to be done in layman terms. This cannot be passed. It is not fair to you. It is not fair to me. And I think every single one of you on council, and I appreciate everything you do, you can find something that you know is not correct in this, just like every single person that is here. It needs to be taken back. It cannot be pushed through. It has to be redone. Thank you very much for letting me talk.
Thank you. Again, anyone else?
I'm Diane Walker, and I live in Bayside. I have a draft letter here that I was going to send in. A lot of it has already been addressed tonight, but I just want to say that we continue to object to these documents seeking to implement the preservation of our land for agricultural purposes, when the province's goals in that regard are aspirational only and not a mandate. We have always looked after our lands and do not need to be told what to do with it. We have a fundamental objection to the R1 zone requirement that any division of property not on maintained public road be restricted to 2 hectares. We find this arbitrary and restricts us as landowners from determining the best use of our properties. It seems to be consistent with the stated objective of the planners to make rural lands more affordable for young people wanting to engage in some form of agriculture. It is not our responsibility to provide a discount or have our land devalued because of the government's wish list. Just because we keep our fields cleared of brush shouldn't be used against us. We would also like to note the recent proposed changes to the provincial veterinarian services, which would appear to be inconsistent with the objective of having hobby farms, for instance. Can't really expect that anybody would want to start up a new operation when the veterinary services are not going to be available. Also, I mean, all the protections for diseases and inspection and everything that goes with that, with the labs and everything. So it would be counterintuitive to want to start a small farm. The R2 zone permits the possibility of smaller lots, and we agree with that. Also the 2 zones, R1 and R2, basically have the same restrictions and so on. The only difference being the 2 hectares as opposed to choosing how you can divide your land. Really, the determination of a lot size depends on other departments, like the Department of Health, who has to determine, septic, water, and so on. And while we're not residents of the original town, we agree with those who have expressed concerns about the move to infill the town plat without regard to the water, sewage capacity of the infrastructure, the parking, the aesthetics. And we see that as a way to only create more seasonal accommodations. To conclude, we ask that both the plan and this bylaw be set aside for more discussion and feedback. There is no pressing need. However, if this council is going to proceed before the next election, then our request that is all of our lands be designated as R2. Thank you.
Anyone else? No.
Lisa Cat.
Lee? Okay. Thanks, Lee.
Hi, my name's Lee Sokaski. I'm a longtime St. Andrews resident and a retired planner. And I was hoping to be speaking last year because I've heard so many good things that I really didn't want to repeat those, but very eloquent remarks, very well thought out remarks, and all on the same tone that the process we've followed for this municipal plan and zoning bylaw have been flawed in that we needed to have more community and landowner engagement from the beginning. I think there were a lot of good theories in this, but they didn't actually hit the ground. So I think I'm encouraging the council to have learned from this process. I think there are many good things in this municipal plan and zoning bylaw, but they're little pieces. They need to be taken apart. We need to go to a process that engages the communities from the beginning. We have 3 communities that are coming together now for the first time. We're now a new family. And I've lived and worked in most of them and really appreciate the strengths that each one's bring. And that needs to shine through a little in this plan. This plan needs to say who we are, reflect on who we are, and then say how we want to move forward. So we need to have that first part to it that identifies and pounds our chest a little bit, says who we are, and then have some broad goal setting to start. What do we want to be? Who do we want to be? And then how we can carry that forward. We got all the arms and legs in these plans. We didn't get the head on the body, the head and the heart, who said, here's our goals, and now we can buy into that. Not everybody's going to like everything, but at least they can be part of it and have their say and know that we've done the best that we can collectively. So I'm hoping that this council will pass, this process on to the next council, and we could look at a slightly different process, actually a radically different process that goes back to how most communities plan, starting out with some sessions to talk about goals and then develop those and check back to make sure that's where we want to be, and then move on to the next part, and then move on to the next part. And I think then in the end, we will wind up with a plan and zoning bylaw within the time frame, if we all want to work together and work smartly at it and realize we'll do the best we can. So thank you, this council, for getting a start on it. Sorry, it's been a rough road for you, but I think, I hope that we've learned from the experience so far. We'll be able to take some of the little pieces of the current plan and zoning bylaw that will work well, and then reshape them and build a more comprehensive plan that all of us can buy into. So thank you, all the people who've made remarks and written in over the last few months, certainly to council as well. I think we'll just, go on from here. But thanks. Let's do it.
Anyone else? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can.
Your worship,
Yes.
we may want to extend an invitation to those on Zoom. I put it in the chat,
Right.
but if they aren't familiar with that, we just want to make sure that.
All right, those people on Zoom, if you would like to chime in, please raise your hand or whatever you can do to let us know, and we will add you to the agenda. Thank you, Mac. Okay, we have no takers on the technology. So with that being done, we adjourn, correct?
Yeah, maybe. Can I speak for a second?
Sure.
As probably some of you are aware, we are moving to the council chambers after this meeting. Just to digest and discuss what was said tonight, it's just easier to do that. And feel free to join us. Part of the reason was CHCO's cameras and stuff are all set up downstairs with microphones. It's just physically impossible to hold a full council meeting up here. So we do apologize, but it will be taped and stuffed. There's no readings. There's nothing like that. It's really to have a discussion about what they heard tonight. It should be noted, these hearing of objections, council doesn't really like the format either, but it's mostly legislated that they're supposed to listen to you folks and not respond. That's just the format of them, which is unfortunate. But I will say that council, a couple of 3 weeks ago, did mention that they don't think they'll get through this in this term. They still could, but realistically, they wanted to have at least this meeting tonight because they got the zoning bylaw, wanted input from the community. We've got lots of written correspondence. So we thank you for everybody that took time and made references and stuff. That's fantastic. And then stay tuned. I can't speak for council. I'll just say that they're reviewing everything and we'll have a bit of a look tonight. But realistically, there's only 3 regular meetings until the elections. And so it's the chances of passing 3 readings of the zoning bylaw and 2 readings of the municipal plan aren't really feasible. And so they'll lead just a whole bunch of data likely for the future council to look at, whether as Ms. Sikorsky said, and start from scratch or just take this current and redo it. Staff, including our planners, will revisit everything, get some direction and move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Spear. So with that, we are going to adjourn to the council chambers, and as our CAO said, you can join us down there if you would like to. So I need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Gumashell, and seconder, Councillor Harland. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Carried. We're now done.